Here at Harvard. I'm sure we're all familiar with the story of the American plains bison. A couple of hundred years ago, numbered in approximately 40 million, reduced to barely 1,000 a little over a century ago. Now there are, it's estimated between 450 and 500,000, mostly on commercial farms and commercial ranches, maybe 20,000 on government lands and other conservation areas. That background is a center pivot irrigation system, which is what the American plains, Great Plains, looks like now. Largely, anybody that's ever flown over the United States and looks down sees all those circles. And so there's been a dramatic, massive loss of biodiversity aside from the bison, and it's also caused a dramatic change in behavior of other wildlife. The project is an attributional comparative life cycle assessment of wholesale feedlot beef versus hunted free-range bison. The handprint and short-range goal is to persuade a percentage of the meat-eating public to consider bison hunting and consumption as an alternative to beef produced via the feedlot system. The mid-range goal is to influence policymakers, the media, the general public, and the environmental community in general to reassess their perception of hunting as a contributory factor in environmental management. And the long-range goal is the restoration of the Great Plains. Now that might seem like it's something of a fantasy. However, there is an ecological and economic rationale behind that, and at least a partial precedent in another part of the world. The scope is a cradle to abattoir, actually what would be called crater to field, or manger to field maybe is a better word. Environmental impact resulting from the processes involved in the production of a single beef or bison carcass. The LCA modeling option for beef will include a Danish model for beef production, and for bison will include bison and grass from the ecosphere, and of course oxygen and water. The evaluation of results will focus on climate change and ecosystem quality impacts. The boundaries will exclude the purchase of a seed herd for both beef and bison upstream, as well as bison and beef byproducts, that's supposed to say downstream. The assumptions are, one, that Danish beef production is a reasonable proxy for American beef production, and that bison are naturally occurring in the ecosphere, not bred, raised, reared, or otherwise produced in the technosphere. These are my initial results, and you can see that the impact is significantly higher than simply hunting one single bison in the field with essentially no inputs from the technosphere except that which got the hunter there and enabled him to kill the bison. The impacts are mainly particulate matters and land occupation and global climate change. And so, in just taking this initial data, and I assume I will have to broaden the hunting side somewhat, although I don't want to make it more complex than it needs to be. I think it has value being a simple study. But I also have sort of an extreme travel number. I used the mid-range distance from the most distant point on the mainland to the center point of the United States, which is Lebanon, Kansas, which is actually in the heart of bison country. And so it's assuming that there's only one single place in the center of the country where this could take place, when actually there are bison ranches throughout the West and even beyond that. So the travel at this point is weighted heavily, more heavily than it needs to be. We don't only grow feed for beef on the Great Plains. We grow all sorts of commodity crops used to make plastics, adhesives, fuels, all kinds of things like that. So anyway, thank you. Preliminary results.
Okay. Would you need, if you wanted to promote this behavior for quite a few people, wouldn't we need more bison? And so there would be more methane because we're promoting more bison to be living on the plains. Is that I can see how.
I've been
for a
studying some
march-
work in Southern Africa. In South Africa, there was a change in law that allowed ranch and farm owners to profit from wildlife, game ranches. And it caused a massive change in land use. And to the tune of the size of the U.S. National Park System was converted to game ranches. Because it was a competitive economic advantage. It was more competitive economically to raise game for hunters than it was to raise commodity crops. So the number of, if you go by carrying capacity, the number of bison would never exceed the carrying capacity. And so as the number of hunters increase, the competitive advantage would increase, the number of ranches that were converted would increase, the land area would increase, and so the amount of methane released by the bison would remain within the parameters of the carrying capacity.
Mhm.